After their gut-wrenching Super Bowl loss in 2022, the Philadelphia Eagles went into a tailspin. 6 losses in their final 7 games, 2 coordinators fired, a head coach on the hot seat, their franchise quarterback drowning in doubt. From contender to chaos, the collapse was absolute. But where everyone saw a team with more questions than answers, one man wasn't close to panicking. Howie Roseman. Years of savvy roster moves and smart gambles had ensured these Eagles were set up for not just a rebound, but for revenge. And in 2024, they took it, crushing the Chiefs' three-peat dreams and reclaiming their place atop the NFL. This is how the Philadelphia Eagles turned shattered dreams into a championship legacy, and why their blueprint could define the next great NFL dynasty. While there was so much quality that went into Philadelphia's dramatic turnaround between 2023 and 2024, a lot of the heavy lifting that made this all possible actually began many years before. Unfortunately, no such era had arrived. Carson Wentz never returned to the MVP form that helped the Eagles secure 13 regular season wins in that Super Bowl winning campaign in 2017. An injury in 2018 led to him being shut down early, with Super Bowl hero Nick Foles taking over and once again leading the team to a playoff berth and postseason success, this time only winning 1 game. Still, Wentz had done enough to convince the Eagles to sign him to a 4-year contract extension ahead of the 2019 season, to which he responded with 4,000 yards, 27 touchdowns, and just 7 interceptions for Wentz, which is why it came as such a surprise to Eagles fans when their team selected Jalen Hurts. A poll on Bleeding Green Nation showed that 61% of fans graded the selection an F, with only 12% grading it above a C. It's fair to say they weren't happy.
Pete left. Pete left. What?
I'm fucking done.
What?
I'm done. I'm fucking done with this.
What?
What? What is going on?
I cannot believe this shit, bro.
What
I
is
cannot
this?
believe this shit.
Hold on.
With so many needs elsewhere on the roster, and with Carson Wentz newly extended and coming off a career best, fans just didn't get it. Nevertheless, Howie saw a talent he felt he couldn't pass up, citing his desire for the Eagles to turn into a quarterback factory. As we all now know, Howie and his team were right to hone in on Hurts as a talent to bring into the building, and the decision ended up paying far earlier dividends than they had imagined. Carson Wentz's play declined significantly that year, tossing almost as many interceptions as touchdowns as the team slipped to a dismal 4-11-1 record. As a result, head coach Doug Peterson lost his job, definitively closing the page on the version of the Philadelphia Eagles who won Super Bowl 52. Thankfully, the new version, led by Jalen Hurts, would be even better. He took over for the final 4 games of his rookie season, and, while only winning 1 game, showed signs of some exciting dual-threat ability that would give the fan base a glimmer of hope. Following the disastrous 2020 campaign, the responsibility fell on general manager Howie Roseman to take the squad apart and start building the next phase of this franchise. One of the most significant moves Roseman made early in the rebuild was the hiring of Nick Sirianni, which came as a shock to many. Despite his lack of experience as an NFL head coach, Sirianni had been an assistant for over a decade, and Roseman was confident he was the guy to take the franchise forward. Sirianni then installed Shane Steichen as offensive coordinator and Jonathan Gannon as defensive coordinator. These two would play a massive part in the overhaul that would take place over the next few seasons, executing their jobs so well that they both now hold head coaching positions. With the coaching staff sorted, Roseman then turned his attention to the 2021 NFL Draft. The first selection of the Nick Sirianni era was Alabama wide receiver Devontae Smith. At 10th overall, the Heisman winner was a menace as a route runner and played far tougher than his slender frame would suggest, more than holding his own at the catch point. Also selected was guard Landon Dickerson, who would play a major role in the 2021 season after getting the starting left guard role following an injury. Milton Williams then arrived in round 3, another name who fans will be very familiar with after his rise to becoming one of the NFL's top defensive tackles in recent years. All in all, a pretty impressive haul. The 2021 season was the first test for the Nick Sirianni and Jalen Hurts era, and the results were immediate, turning around their 4-11-1 2020 season into a 9-8 season with a return to the playoffs. Things began slowly with a 2-5 start, but once the team began to mesh, they finished the season strong, led by the play of Jalen Hurts. Hurts was a revelation, using his dual threat abilities to hurt opposition teams and lead the league in rushing yards and rushing touchdowns among quarterbacks. Unfortunately, the Eagles' promising season ended in the wildcard round against the Buccaneers, but it was clear that they had turned their trajectory around and could be a contender in the years to come. In 2022, year 2 of this rebuild, the Eagles continued to make smart offseason moves to build on their on-field improvement and add some depth and skill to their roster. In free agency, the Eagles added edge Hassan Reddick and cornerback James Bradbury to bolster their defense. In the draft, Roseman once again jumped at the opportunity to add players who could contribute immediately, but also be a key part of the team long term. His 2021 class had got his team back to winning ways, and his efforts in 2022 helped turbocharge this success in style. The haul included defensive tackle Jordan Davis out of Georgia, center Cam Jurgens out of Nebraska, and linebacker Nakobe Dean, also from Georgia, who would all go on to play a key role in this rebuild. This is where the genius of Howie Roseman really starts to come into view. Davis and Jurgens in particular would slot into the depth chart behind franchise legends such as Fletcher Cox and Jason Kelce. Their selections were not filling urgent needs for the team, instead dropping developing players in behind elite mentors who could coach them up, ready for whenever Cox and Kelce decided to call it a day. However, easily the most significant move of the draft and the offseason in general came when the Eagles traded for veteran wide receiver A.J. Brown, giving up a first and third round pick in return. Brown had been one of the most intriguing receiver prospects in the draft when he entered the league in 2019. But was inexplicably traded away just a few years later. It was a controversial move by the Titans general manager John Robinson, and one that ultimately cost him his job. It was clear that Brown had all the tools to become one of the best receivers in the league if given the right opportunity, and he found that in spades when the Eagles moved for him. Pairing him with one of the best young quarterbacks in the league on an emerging offense seemed destined to be a winning formula, and it was. As the 2022 season started, it was clear that the Eagles were building on the improvements made in 2021, starting red hot and winning their first 8 games of the season. The offense kept its momentum from that previous season alive and was dominant. Led by Hurts, Brown, and Devontae Smith, the Eagles put up at least 20 points in all but 2 of their games, with new arrival Brown breaking out with 1,500 yards and 11 touchdowns, supported admirably by Smith's 1,200 yards and 7 scores. Howie Roseman's decision to trade for Brown had paid off big time, helping Hurts break out himself to the tune of 3,700 yards and 22 touchdowns through the air to go along with 760 yards and 13 scores on the ground. After a shaky start to his career, Hurts now looked like one of the most exciting dual-threat quarterbacks in the league, and Roseman's bold call to trade significant capital for Brown was a big reason why. The defense was equally terrifying, leading the league in sacks while ranking 5th in takeaways and 8th in points allowed. The new additions to the team contributed in a big way to the Eagles' turnaround, with James Bradbury being voted into the All-Pro team and Hassan Reddick wreaking havoc with his pass rushing, notching a whopping 16 sacks. Jordan Davis and Nakobe Dean featured in limited roles but played their respective parts in making this one of the best defenses in the league. The Eagles finished the season 14-3, the best record in the NFC, entering the playoffs as the number 1 seed. Raiders' Brock Purdy injured his elbow on their first possession of the game, and from that point on, it was a mere procession, with the Eagles going on to win 31-7. Only 2 seasons after Doug Peterson's firing, Nick Sirianni had led the Philadelphia Eagles back to the big game, doing so in a dominant fashion and through intelligent drafting and free agency moves. The additions of Jalen Hurts, Devontae Smith, and A.J. Brown had transformed the offense, while their defense made up of a veteran core mixed with some young talent was one of the best in the league. But they still had one more game to get through before the rebuild was complete, facing them in Super Bowl 57 with yet another dynasty in the making, the Kansas City Chiefs. Equally as dominant in the regular season, the Chiefs had the key difference of having made 2 Super Bowls and winning one of them. The Eagles got off to a good start with Hurts opening the score with a tush push, before Philly added 2 more touchdowns via an A.J. Brown catch and another Hurts run. They went into the locker room for halftime with a 24-14 lead, but the Chiefs mounted a comeback and limited the Eagles to just 11 second-half points, ultimately winning 38-35 in a thriller. This was a bitter pill to swallow for the Eagles, having been as dominant as they had throughout the regular season and playoffs, only to have it swept from under them. Great teams take losses like these on the chin and figure out how to take that extra step and come back stronger next season. The question is, could these Philadelphia Eagles? Entering the 2023 offseason, the Eagles were fired up to keep building on what they had achieved since installing the new regime. It wouldn't be easy though, as they suffered key losses to their coaching staff, with Shane Steichen and Jonathan Gannon leaving for head coaching positions in Indianapolis and Arizona respectively. Losing so much brainpower in one go is always going to be a problem, with Brian Johnson and Sean Desai moving into coordinator positions where they had huge shoes to fill. With the remaining coaching positions sorted, it would also be key for Howie Roseman to continue his smart team planning and make some moves in free agency and the draft. Free agency was fairly quiet for the Eagles, with them adding only depth to their defensive unit, as well as some additions to their offensive skill positions. They did trade for running back DeAndre Swift, who had been a solid contributor in Detroit and would add some finesse to their run game. But once again, the draft was where Roseman managed to put in some excellent work, with the team landing defensive tackle Jalen Carter and linebacker Nolan Smith, both out of Georgia, who could step in right away and improve this fearsome defense. The season began in near identical fashion to 2022, with the Eagles jumping out to a 10-1 start, which included big wins over the Kansas City Chiefs and Buffalo Bills. Following the win against the Bills in Week 12, something changed though. The Eagles suddenly began to drop games one after another. While the offense had been purring throughout the first half of the season and continued producing, the defense had noticeably fallen off a cliff. In that 2023 season, they finished 26th in yards allowed and 30th for points allowed. As a result, the team ultimately lost 5 of their last 6 regular season games. This was only good enough for the 5th seed in the NFC, quite a major step down after being in the Super Bowl one season earlier and looking like top dogs for much of the year. Things then went from bad to worse when failing to score in the second half of their wildcard round clash with Tampa Bay, losing 32-9. This was a big shock to everyone after starting the season as dominant as ever and standing out as a favorite for a Super Bowl run. This turnaround from one season to the next was influenced in part by the brain drain that saw Shane Steichen and Jonathan Gannon depart and significant regression on defense. The offense still showed it could be dominant, but towards the end of the season, their play simply wasn't enough to keep them in games. The response from the fan base and analysts was strong, and some even called for head coach Nick Sirianni to be replaced. Roseman ultimately decided to stick by the guy who had recently led them to a Super Bowl, but it was clear to him that changes were needed to get this franchise back on track. In the offseason, Roseman was quick to start making these changes. He fired defensive coordinator Sean Desai and offensive coordinator Brian Johnson. To replace them, he brought along widely respected veteran defensive coordinator Vic Fangio and the up-and-coming Kellen Moore to take over as offensive coordinator. This falls in line with how Roseman has treated this rebuild from the beginning. Barkley had been one of the most dynamic runners in the league since he was drafted and could add great value to any team. Following a great couple of years in New York after he was drafted, Barkley had struggled with injury, and his production suffered due to playing behind a pretty porous Giants offensive line, so by the time his contract was up, many questioned whether he was still capable of producing at his highest level. But Roseman saw this as an opportunity to get the final piece to their offense. The Eagles had had solid running back play since the Hurts era started, but were willing to let DeAndre Swift go to take advantage of Barkley's availability. To go along with the headline addition on offense, Roseman also found a key addition on defense, although nobody knew what a stroke of genius this move was until the season began. Zach Bond had flown under the radar after 4 unspectacular seasons in New Orleans, contributing mostly on special teams. Therefore, nobody really batted an eye when he signed with the Eagles in 2024 free agency for $3.5 million. As we all now know, this would quickly turn into one of the best deals in NFL history. On top of Barkley and Bond, the Eagles also picked up tackle Mekhi Becton, who would convert into a guard, and brought back CJ Gardner-Johnson to add to their defensive depth. While they did not lose any key players to free agency, they did lose Jason Kelce and Fletcher Cox to retirement. These two combined for nearly 400 games between them, and both have a case for being inducted into the Hall of Fame. Normally, their departures from both lines would be catastrophic, but Roseman's elite drafting had put his team in good stead to handle the turnover in the trenches. The presence of Jordan Davis and Jalen Carter meant that Philly didn't miss a beat on defense, and Cam Jurgens was more than ready to fill Kelce's shoes on offense. That is how you manage your roster. With the foundations in place, the Eagles prepared for a 2024 NFL draft in which they could find the finishing touches. They addressed their defensive issues by picking up a pair of cornerbacks in the first 2 rounds, Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean. Having given up the second most passing yards in 2023 with 253 yards per game, this was a clear area of need, to the extent that Howie Roseman felt the need to double down, finding immense value in both Mitchell and DeJean. They also added defensive end Jalix Hunt in round 3. With a new look team and a new staff for both the offense and defense, the Eagles looked set to make a comeback from their late season woes in 2023, and once again, challenge for a Super Bowl. The 2024 season got off to a slightly rocky start, with the Eagles splitting their first 4 games. This included a win over a good Green Bay Packers team and losses to the Falcons and Buccaneers. It was after their Week 5 bye that the Eagles found their groove, with the offense beginning to gel with the combination of Hurts under center, Barkley in the backfield, and A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, and Dallas Goedert catching passes. They scored at least 20 points in all but 2 of their games, and would rank 7th in points scored and 8th in total yards. Roseman was once again vindicated for his bold offseason move, with free agent signing Saquon Barkley becoming just the 9th player in NFL history to run for over 2,000 yards. He and Hurts powered the team to 179.3 rushing yards per game, which was 2nd most in the NFL. The defense made a gigantic bounce back under Fangio, ranking 2nd in points allowed and 1st in yards allowed. Free agency signing Zach Bond was a major surprise, with him leading the team with a whopping 151 tackles, earning him first-team All-Pro honors and a nomination for Defensive Player of the Year. Jalen Carter was also a second-team All-Pro, while Jordan Davis was a constant game wrecker, starting every single game. With the defense finally returning to their old self, and the offense humming behind Saquon Barkley, Philly finished 2nd in the NFC behind the Lions, and were once again looking like title contenders. They controlled the Packers in the wildcard round to win 22-10, before surviving a scare from the LA Rams, ultimately winning 28-22, thanks to a monstrous 205-yard, 2-touchdown effort by Barkley. While many expected the Eagles to be facing the Detroit Lions in the NFC Championship game, it would end up being the Washington Commanders, led by rookie sensation Jaden Daniels. The Eagles were heavy favorites, and they were given the ideal start, scoring a pair of touchdowns on their first 2 drives, including a sumptuous 60-yard rushing touchdown courtesy of Saquon Barkley. This set the tone for the dominant 55-23 victory, booking Philly's ticket for Super Bowl 59 in New Orleans. This was, of course, a highly anticipated rematch of Super Bowl 57, featuring the 2 best teams in football. The Chiefs were on the hunt for their 3rd straight Super Bowl title, while the Eagles were looking to put a stamp on their impressive rebuild. The expectation was a highly competitive and tight matchup that could even go to overtime. However, from the very first play to the last, the Chiefs were unable to do anything on both sides of the ball. Philly's elite defensive unit suffocated and embarrassed the Chiefs, and Hurts and company were also too much on offense. A 34-0 lead with 2 minutes to go in the 3rd quarter meant there was very little drama for fans to enjoy in the 4th. Ultimately, a couple of late touchdowns made the scoreline look a bit more flattering for the Chiefs, falling by 22 points to 40. The Eagles had done it 7 years after their last Super Bowl win, and following a superb rebuild, Philadelphia had put together an incredible team that looked set to compete for the long term. And the scary thing is, they have only gotten better in the 2025 offseason, building on the incredible foundations laid by Howie Roseman. Jalix Hunt will slot in to replace the departing Josh Sweat, looking to pick up the mantle from the recently retired Brandon Graham. and he will be joined by a very exciting cohort of defensive rookies. Once again, it appears as if Howie found the value of the draft in the form of Jahad Campbell with the 31st pick. Then, Andrew Mukuba arrives as a tough-as-nails safety, followed by a long list of other players who should contribute early and often, including defensive tackle Ty Robinson, cornerback Mac McWilliams, linebacker Smale London, and offensive linemen Miles Hinton and Cameron Williams. Dare we say, Howie has done it again? With Zach Bond and Saquon Barkley both earning tiny pay rises, this team is set up for success for long into the future. Roseman understands the importance of building from the trenches, drafting ahead of time, and knowing exactly the right time to swing for the fences with a big trade or free agent acquisition. With him in the front office and a lethal arsenal of weapons on the field, we might well be looking at the sport's next great dynasty. But what do you think? Let us know in the comments.